You didn't lose them. You just forced them to face what they spent their life avoiding. People assume losing someone means failure, like you weren't enough, like you should have held on longer, like if you had been more patient, more forgiving, more understanding, they would have stayed. That entire narrative is bullshit. You didn't lose them. You confronted their comfort. You disrupted their emotional autopilot. You made them feel something they weren't equipped to feel. Not because you pushed too hard, but because they never learned how to hold on to anything real. Your presence wasn't the problem. Your impact was. And the moment a person starts feeling emotions they can't control, fear, attachment, vulnerability, dependency, they don't always lean in. Some run, some shut down, some pretend nothing happened. Some detach so fast you wonder if you imagined the entire connection. It's not that you weren't valuable. It's that the connection demanded emotional responsibility they weren't built to handle. They weren't afraid of you. They were afraid of how real they felt when they were with you. People who've never faced themselves don't know how to face someone who sees them. You weren't a distraction. You were a mirror. And mirrors are uncomfortable for people who've spent years avoiding their own reflection. You reflected back their emotional inconsistency, their avoidance patterns, their inability to communicate, their fear of closeness, their lack of emotional maturity. They didn't walk away because you were too much. They walked away because you were the first person who made them realize how little they offer emotionally. It's easy to stay in relationships where nothing is required, where attention is shallow, feelings are muted, and vulnerability is optional, but you demanded depth simply by existing. Your presence exposed their superficial emotional framework. They didn't lose you. They lost the version of themselves they pretended to be. They thought detachment was control until your absence became a consequence. While you were there, they believed they had emotional leverage. You were available. You cared deeply. You showed consistency. You didn't play games. You communicated clearly. They mistook that for permanence. People who never earn stability assume stability never leaves. They assumed you'd stay no matter how little they gave, how much they pulled away, how rarely they showed up. Then you stopped showing up, and reality hit like impact. Your silence wasn't passive. It was the moment you reclaimed your emotional authority. And that's when they finally felt something, not during the relationship, but after they lost the access they assumed was guaranteed. Most people don't value what they have. They value the control they think they have over it. When you took that control back, the entire dynamic flipped. You didn't make them uncomfortable, their growth did. Stop telling yourself you caused chaos. You triggered evolution. You forced emotions out of hiding, forced introspection, forced accountability. And people who aren't ready for growth don't respond with gratitude. They respond with defense mechanisms, withdrawal, emotional distance, anger, blame, minimization, disconnection. Not because you hurt them, but because you awakened dormant emotions they weren't prepared to manage. They didn't leave because you were wrong for them. They left because you were right for a version of them they haven't grown into yet. The truth that hurts you now will hurt them later. You feel the pain immediately. They feel it delayed. You confront the loss in real time. They confront it when they finally run out of distractions. Your heart breaks at separation. Their heart breaks at realization. You move on because you process what happened. They stay stuck because they avoided processing it at all. You didn't lose them. They lost the chance to evolve, alongside someone who pulled them out of emotional autopilot. You made them feel something real. They just weren't ready to feel it. You keep replaying the situation in your head like you did something wrong, but that's exactly why you're stuck. You're trying to diagnose loss when the reality is there was no loss to diagnose. What happened wasn't abandonment. It was impact. You triggered an emotional response in someone who usually lives disconnected from their own feelings, and instead of leaning in, they backed off. People don't disappear because you were unworthy. They disappear because they were unprepared. Someone who's used to emotional numbness will not react calmly when someone finally touches a part of them they've been avoiding for years. They'll pull away because the experience doesn't fit their internal narrative. Their identity is built around detachment, so attachment feels like a threat, not a gift. You need to stop interpreting silence as rejection. Silence is a defense mechanism. It's an attempt to return to emotional equilibrium. When someone who operates on survival mode suddenly feels vulnerability, they will instinctively retreat not to punish you, but to protect themselves from themselves. They don't know how to handle a version of themselves that cares. And here's where you screw things up. You start chasing, explaining, apologizing, begging for clarity, hoping that fixing communication will make them return. But you're not dealing with a communication problem. You're dealing with emotional overload. The more you push to talk things out, the more they shut down, because you're trying to solve a personal internal conflict with an external dialogue. They're not processing you. They're processing themselves. That person didn't leave because you were too much. They left because they suddenly realized they're not as numb, indifferent, or detached as they believed. You exposed a contradiction. And while you're sitting here overanalyzing your words, they're trying to unfeel what they felt. The truth is brutal. Your presence forced them to confront parts of themselves they weren't ready to face. That's not rejection. That's impact. At some point, you need to flip the perspective and stop romanticizing your role in their story. You didn't just care about them, you disrupted their emotional equilibrium. You introduced intensity where there was emotional distance. You made things real, maybe too real for someone who's built their identity on not needing anyone. People who value control fear emotional influence. Losing someone doesn't destroy them. Feeling something does. That's why they pull back, not because they don't value you, but because they don't know how to value someone without losing the version of themselves they're comfortable with. And here's the mistake you can't afford to repeat. You think the connection means they'll come back. You assume emotional impact guarantees emotional commitment. It doesn't. People don't choose what moves them. They choose what they feel safe returning to. And safety for them isn't emotional depth. It's emotional neutrality. They go back to what demands nothing, not what awakens everything. You're waiting for closure, but closure assumes the story ended. The situation didn't end, it got paused at a point they weren't ready to explore. They're not done feeling. They're avoiding the impact of feeling. That's why people like this often return months or years later. Not when they miss you, but when they finally miss the version of themselves they were becoming with you. They don't come back for love. They come back for identity. But here's the uncomfortable truth. It's not your responsibility to hold emotional space for someone who refuses to hold it for themselves. Their growth is not your burden. Their fear is not your obligation. If you wait for them to evolve, you're not loyal, you're stagnant. You need to stop measuring your worth by how deeply someone responds to you. Your value isn't proved by how hard someone falls for you. It's proved by how clearly you can walk away when they can't handle what they feel. Impact doesn't make you responsible. Influence doesn't make you owned. The point isn't to be unforgettable. The point is to be unavailable to anyone who can't handle being affected by you. If they return, meet them where they show up, not where they left. If they don't, even better, use this experience as proof that you're not meant for people who fear depth. You don't need to soften yourself to be easier to absorb. You need people built to handle the gravity you bring. You didn't lose them. You just woke up a part of them they weren't ready to meet, and now it's their problem, not yours.